Hey everyone, Dan McKenzie with the McKenzie Law Firm. We are an estate planning, estate administration, and small business counsel law firm in the Denver, Colorado area. And one question that we get a lot, both on the planning side and on the estate administration side, is there really isn't much here. Do we really need to open a probate process, or is it really worth bothering to plan for this? A lot of times it's people who maybe live like in a condo or a townhome, and maybe they have some personal property and so, bank account and stuff like that, but they don't feel like they have an estate, right? Like something elaborate that would be hard to distribute. And this can be, they can be especially confused as to why any sort of formal process is necessary if they have a will, or if they just have one kid, for example, if it's really clear who's going to get what, and the people seem to agree with each other who might split those assets. Like, do we really need to have like a court involved in this process? And it's not really up to you to determine whether or not you use a probate process. Title companies, if you try and sell real estate that you are not on the title for, they're going to need to some explanation for what authority you have to sell that real estate. The probate process gives you that. Banks, same thing. If you go in there and say, hey, the account owner has passed away, I am his son, I am here to collect the funds in that account, and here's a will even saying that I'm the personal representative and that I get all the assets in his estate, they don't have a way to know if that really is the last will, whether or not he even created it, signed it. That is what the probate process is for. But really, point is that you don't really get to decide. There are certain circumstances where you don't have to open a probate. You might want to because you have some sort of dispute about assets or creditor issues or things like that you want to get resolved. So there can be situations where you might choose to open one even though you don't have to. But then the question is, okay, when do you have to open a probate? And in Colorado, there's kind of a process that we go through for determining, when a probate actually has to be opened. And so what we're looking at here is first, okay, how did the person have their assets titled? So asset titling. And if the person who passed away just owned their stuff all by themselves, well, again, there's not really anyone else on that asset who can use it or utilize it or sell it or whatever else. We got to go to something else here. And so that is number one. And then number two is we look to see, is there any designated beneficiary instruction attached to any particular asset? And if there is, that instruction is probably going to be followed. That is a contract with your insurance, your life insurance provider, or your IRA custodian, or your bank account or whatever else. Like there's ways to attach designated beneficiary instructions to a lot of different assets, but usually life insurance and retirement accounts at least will have those on them. That's usually part of the setup process for those. There can be, in Colorado, we have beneficiary deeds, so you can actually have beneficiary designations on your house, for example. There are, the DMV has forms for your car, and so there's ways to put a designated beneficiary on your car. Lots of stuff, not really personal property, but other than that, you can have designated beneficiaries on a lot of things, but usually people don't actually. Usually it's a couple of things, but not everything. Okay, and then we get down, okay, what about things that are in a trust or maybe in a business? So if the person had a trust, things were titled to that. The trust agreement controls what is titled to the trust. So you want to look and see that. That's kind of, you'll see that as you're looking at asset titling if things are titled to the trust. And then we get down here and okay, whatever's left at this point, we look at and see, okay, that's controlled by the will. If there is a will, if there's no state law, or if we've gotten past the will and there's still things left to get distributed, state law is going to determine where those things go. And so this is kind of an order of how things go when someone passes away. And the thing to understand in Colorado is that if we get past these things, so let's say they own stuff that was not co-owned by a survivor, they didn't have designated beneficiary instructions, wasn't in a trust. Okay, now we're down to the will or state law, these two things. What's left after we've taken these three things out of the equation? And if what's left is worth more than, if you look at the statute, the number is actually $50,000, but that number is being adjusted for inflation every year. So right now, making this video in 2021. It's actually $70,000. Goes usually goes up a little every year, or includes real estate. Then you're going to have to open a probate, because this is a big enough estate that the Colorado State Legislature has determined that this is enough assets that we want to make sure that those things get distributed to the right people. And then the other thing that, again, people are always overlooking is it's not just getting the assets to the right people, but also making sure that any debts or liabilities are paid off, and that people who are owed money by the person who passed away have a fair chance to get that claim settled before, again, the family, runs off with the assets. So this is the number here that will get you thrown in a probate. And if the person who passed away, did not have this after we've gone through this process, usually there's a bank account. A lot of times there's a car. Even if they've done a pretty good job of taking care of things up in 1, 2, or 3, usually there's still a few things left over. And so for those items, if we don't have this much at stake, what that person does is whoever is trying to get the estate settled would take what's called a small estate affidavit into the various financial institutions or the DMV or wherever the asset titling is kind of being held, and would swear under oath that there's less than this amount at stake and they are entitled to take it without a court process. So again, you can have a very modest condo with very modest personal property in it and very modest bank account, and well, you got real estate. That condo is real estate, right? So yes, there can be situations where very small estates need to be probated. And again, doesn't matter if there's a will, doesn't matter if the family agrees. These are the numbers, and so that is what determines probate. And then again, there are some situations where we've had where really there isn't this much at stake, but there's some sort of financial instrument or some sort of account in the financial institution holding it and saying, look, we're not taking that small estate affidavit. We're not relying on that. So we know that this asset is worth less than this and does not include real estate, but we still want a court order to be sure. And we've run into that circumstance sometimes too. So sometimes probates get open even for more modest estates than this. So yes. The answer to the title question on this video, do you need to open a probate for even a modest estate? The answer can be yes in many circumstances. It can be, on the flip side, the person who passed away might, have millions of dollars, but if they had designated beneficiary instructions attached, were put in a trust, were co-titled with someone else, you can have a situation where millions of dollars goes without any probate process. So it does not always go as you would predict. You can't look at the assets necessarily from the outside without really examining the titles and designated beneficiary instructions and to know whether or not a probate is going to be necessary. So hopefully that helps if you're trying to determine whether there's a way around probate, or if you're doing your own planning right now and trying to figure out how would I set up my own estate to make sure my family doesn't have to go through probate. We're happy to talk to you about that. Again, we're the McKenzie Law Firm in Denver, Colorado, and phone number is 303-578-2745, and I appreciate you watching this video. I hope it was helpful.